Okay, so here what we have is our EV Plus. This is the main frame of the actual drone. You have some aileron controls here for your to control your up and down of the airplane. You can picture yaw, roll, all the different motions that it goes through when it's flying. You have a payload bay here. This payload bay is set up for our different cameras. Today we're going to fly the multispectral camera we have. This is a SenseFly Sequoia camera. So you can see on the back side we have 5 different lenses. We have your red, your green, your blue, your red edge, and we also have an RGB type image that'll be just like what's on your cell phone. And on here we have there's SD card within this camera here, so the actual individual images are all saved on here. That way we can remove them for data processing later. This platform is really light. Like, see, it's basically looks like styrofoam, and it is, which is, it helps manufacture and make them cheaper, but it also allows them, they're a little soft, so it gives them some absorbency when they land in hard areas. So on the back side you have a motor here that spins. This motor turns the propeller that actually pushes the aircraft. So most airplanes that'll be on the front, it actually pulls the aircraft. This one actually pushes the aircraft. We have the cockpit on the front where the cockpit on a regular plane would be. This is where our battery would go. This is some of our GPS and our communication with our base station here. So we have GPS on this frame, and we also have a communication antenna where we can communicate with us back here on the ground, so we can give it orders like you need to go here, do this, do that type stuff. You have a light bar here that gives you different states of the airplane, so that lets you know when you're in communication, when you're not. So when you're here troubleshooting stuff, this changes colors, and each light means something different. So also on the bottom here we have a hard shell. This hard shell is for the landing, so it comes in, as you'll see on the video later, it comes in pretty fast for a landing. So this is kind of like a skid plate, I guess you would call it. So when it comes in, it kind of hits the ground. As you can see, it would come in and kind of hit. It gives it something soft to slide on, and then it doesn't damage the styrofoam. So I'm gonna hand this to Caroline. I'm gonna let her start assembling the plane so you can kind of see how it goes together.
So that's where the camera goes, and you plug in the camera to that micro USB, and then it snaps in with magnets. And there's different cameras you can put in here. This is just the one we're flying today. On
this camera, when you're flying with cloud cover and stuff, it changes the actual reflectance you get on the ground. So when you're trying to get a reflectance type image with the NIR, this is a sunshine sensor that's on the top of this camera. So what it does is clouds come over, this adjusts for the sunlight that you're getting. So if you have a cloud in one spot of the field and not clouds in other spots of the field, it doesn't affect how much reflectance we get. This allows it to compensate for that.
Propeller goes on the end. We put 2 on there just for safety. Sometimes, you can only put 1 if you want. But if 1 breaks, then your whole plane's coming down.
Yep.
There's the propeller, and then the wings go on the side. Clip in.
Just be sure they fit in.
Like James was saying, that clips in right there and controls this.
There's a reason this propeller is not rigid mounted to this motor. So the motor stops when it comes in for the land. The engine completely stops and it goes to a land. So what you run into is sometimes it'll stop like this. So this allows this just to pop up like this, and it can land without breaking anything. And then all you simply have to do is come back, wiggle it in place, and it's right back lined up. Some of the earlier drones that we had, we broke a lot of propellers on them. Even the ones that were on the front, they would break too. So they come up with this design, which is pretty slick, and it helps. Or even if you're a little bit to the side, it just kind of pops out of whack anyway, and it automatically realigns itself.
Last thing you gotta do is you gotta hook up the battery, and then once you hook up the battery,
it'll go through some safety checks, and you can see it move your controls here, and it's starting to connect itself to our system.
And that's the light James was talking about.
Yeah. So blue means we're good.
It's connected now to the controls.
So here you can see at the very top, the status of our plane is, we basically know where it is. The GPS is hooked up, but takeoff's not possible because we have not planned a flight or set up a home position or a landing position. You see our autonomy here. It tells us we have plenty of battery, but of course we don't have a flight time because we're not flying, and we have no distance. We don't know where home is, and that also lets you know you don't know where home is because you don't know the distance from home. But we have 100% link quality. So that means, those lights I was telling you earlier that's on top of the plane, that means that our connection to the plane is great. And this is just an overall view of everything that goes on with the plane. So as you're flying, this lets you see what the plane is seeing while it's, you know, a quarter mile from you up in the air.
Now we're gonna do a mission block. So I'm gonna add where we wanna fly. This will be the flight plan. I can put it out. There you go. This is where the drone will be flying. You can set where you want it to start, which I haven't done yet, but you can set where you want it to start and it'll fly these paths. You can give it more of a lateral overlap, more longitudinal overlap, which just means that the lines will be closer together or longer depending on how accurately and how much of an overlap you want on those pictures. Obviously, when the overlap is bigger, it is a longer flight. This will show you, you know, the acreage that you're flying and the number of photos it's planning to take. Estimated flight distance and the altitude that it's going to fly at.
One thing to add to what Caroline was saying, you have a big ring around the actual flight area right here. These black lines that are on here that you see, these are what we call way lines. They are what the plane is going to follow and take pictures along those lines. And the way lines, everything will always fall within this circle. This circle is what we call a geofence. So what that means is, if this plane at any point loses this connection that we established earlier, so if we get to a point where we lose control of it, let's just say it starts flying down this bottom way line and it just flies all the way and it loses connection down here, it's not going to just keep flying straight even though it lost connection. Once it gets to this geofence, it will not fly outside of it. So we can make this geofence bigger and smaller, and Caroline, of course, will make this bigger. Once she gets her flight set up, we'll have to make the geofence larger. But the geofence is strictly for safety. So we know this plane will not leave this area. Even if we lose total connection or our computer dies, anything that goes wrong, it will not fly outside that geofence. So that way we can set up and we can protect, you know, other people and not fly where we don't need to be flying. So what we're doing now, we're taking the drone out. We actually set the drone exactly where we want it to land. And part of that is a safety thing, because if you could just set a home within the software and you didn't actually walk to the area, what's being shown in, you know, Google Earth or Google Maps, whatever you're using at the time, might not be exactly what's there. So they force you to walk to the area you're actually going to land at. So as we can see out here, there's nothing here, and we're going to want to land somewhere in the grass, probably about right in this area right here. So you kind of see we kind of have a runway type area here to land in. Our wind is coming from kind of the northeast direction over here. So we want to fly into the wind. So when we come in for the landing, we'll be coming from that direction this way, and this plane will fly into the wind the entire time as it comes into land. So like I mentioned earlier, it's very important to take off into the wind and to land into the wind, because as that wind is going under the plane, it helps keep it, of course, in the air. But what you run into is a situation where if the wind is the difference between airspeed and ground speed, and that's what we run into a lot with these drones. We have a minimum airspeed, you know, 25, 30 knots is generally what we're running. Well, if we're flying into a 10-knot wind and it's coming toward us, our airspeed just went from 25 knots to 35 knots. But if the wind is going with us, not against us, then we went from 25 knots down to 15 knots, which is below the area that we need to keep us in the air. And so the motor starts having to work faster and the plane is trying to move faster because the wind under it is moving. So I know the concept it's a little hard to really grasp it, because when you think of speed, it's always based on, your speed is based on the earth, right? How fast are you moving on a steel surface? But when you're in the air, it's a totally different situation. So that's why we always want to land going into the wind and take off going into the wind, so he can have a consistent force against us.
Here's the home point that we just set. James walked over there and so I could mark where he put the drone. So that's where it's going to land, and it's going to come in this way and land.
Okay, so now that we've programmed our home point, we've programmed our landing points, and we know which directions the wind's going, we're going to actually take the EV, we're going to fire it up, and we're going to let the motor spool up to full capacity. Once it's spooled up, I will launch the plane. So you get the plane up like this. You shake it 3 or 4 times. The propeller will cut on. You see the propeller's on now. Now it's at full speed. Once it's at full speed, you back up. And she's gone. We generally have 2 people. We have a pilot and we have a spotter. Caroline's our pilot today. She's actually monitoring all the stuff on the screen we talked about earlier. I'm actually the spotter. I'm keeping a watch on the plane, actually on the ground, and I'm looking for any issues that might be going on. The plane looks like this might be flying funny. If any helicopters, airplanes look like they might be coming to our area, I'll tell Caroline, hey, we have an issue. You need to land. You need to pause our flight, because we have several options for safety. We can pause the flight and just make it spin a circle, so it'll just fly in one circle, or we can make it immediately just crash land right where it is. It kills the motor and does a complete nosedive, like we see we're going to hit another airplane. So there's a lot of things we can do, and that's my job when we're flying. I'm always watching the plane up there. You can actually maybe see the plane overhead. I don't know if you can tell, but it's actually coming right over us now, taking its pictures, and it's flying its first way line.
Look like while it's flying, as you can tell, it's moving down the way lines, and those little blocks right there are little pictures it's taken. So it'll take several hundred pictures for the flight. This is a really small flight, so it's not as many, but for a real data collection, if you were going to collect the whole field, it would be a lot of data processing that you'd have to do afterwards. And you can see it's flying at pretty slowly. I mean, it's not that slow, but the whole flight said it was going to take about 8 minutes or so. And over here you can see our instrument temperatures. This is one thing you really have to watch. This instrument temperature is in the yellow. It's 176. It was a little high when we took off, but it's cooled down since then. So this down here shows you the pitch of the plane, how it's rotating. So you can see how level it is. If it's making a turn, it correlates with it making this turn around the way line.
So Caroline just let me know that we're on the last way line of this flight. So we've collected the data in this section of the field we planned on collecting. Okay, as you can see now, it's flying away from us, going out to set up on the final descent. And all while this is going on, I'm keeping a watch on anything in our landing zone. Of course, we're out in the field with nobody right now, so everything's great. But you know, you're not always in a luxurious place like this to be landing. You might be, I've flown in downtown Montgomery before. So I mean, you might be somewhere where you're right in the middle of a bunch of people. So we're coming in for our landing. It comes in right there. And that's right where we had it set. Perfect landing. As you can see, here we are landed. Our blue light is on, so we know we still have connection. Of course, we knew we did, and we had no problems. And the propeller stayed intact. You just do a quick once over. Just look at everything. Be sure everything looks good. You'll have a little piece of grass or two, something like that. But all the wings look good. Everything seems to be functioning. Of course, it's still on right now, so it's not going to let me move those. But the motor and all looks good, and everything's great. So we'll actually take this back over to the control center we have there, and we can download the images out of the camera. We can also collect all the telemetry data off the actual plane, and we can process it and generate an ortho mosaic for the data we just collected.